Hello and welcome, it's Juliana Michaels here with more Halloween card inspiration. In this video, I'm sharing another card I made using some of the stamps, stencils, and dies from the Tim Holtz 2024 Halloween releases. Get ready for some wicked fun with crackle paste and distress sprays. As always, feel free to look through your stash and find things that you can use to create along with me. However, if you are interested in any of the products I'm using, you can find the supply list with links in the description box below. Just click on more to see more. For this card, I'm going to be working with some of the new stamps and stencils from the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous Halloween 2024 release. And the stencil I'm going to be using is the Bone stencil. This also comes in the mini set 61. Then I'm going to be working with the Spooky Spirits stamp set, in particular the Sentiments, and then the Curator stamp set as well. And then I'm also going to be working with the Vault Gothic Portraits die set from Tim Holtz and Sizzix. The papers I'm going to be using are Distress Watercolor cardstock and the black craft stock. And the mediums I'm going to be using is the Crackle Paste Opaque. I'm going to be using some Distress Spritz and Wilted Violet and Distress Spray Stain and Dusty Concord, Villainous Potion, Chipped Sapphire, and Seedless Preserves. The stamping ink I'm going to be using is the Archival ink and black soot, so just some sort of permanent waterproof ink. And then we're also going to be doing a little bit of heat embossing with some white embossing powder, and so you'll just need an embossing ink for that. So before we begin on the background, we're just taking a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock that I've cut to 4 1/4 by 6 inches. The finished card size is going to be 4 1/2 by 6 1/4. And for the stamping, I'm going to use the Archival ink, and then I'm going to be taking some of the images from this Curator stamp set. And I'm just going to be stamping kind of like a little pattern across the background here with the stamps kind of going at a little bit of a diagonal. And I'm just going to kind of randomly stamp the images down across the page here. And it's going to kind of get some pulled loose here so they're easier to access as I need them. And then other than just kind of stamping and creating kind of this random diagonal pattern, just going to try to alternate kind of between different sizes and shapes to create the pattern and design here. And as I use the stamp, I'm going to kind of sit it over here out of the way so I've used it. And there's just a look at our stamped background. And now we're going to move on to the next part, which is we're going to add some paste using this bone stencil. And I'm just going to use this sticky mat grid to kind of help hold the stencil in place. Line that up. That'll help hold my paper. And then I'm just going to kind of center it here on the cardstock. And then to apply the paste, I'm just going to use a palette knife, and this is the Crackle Paste Opaque. And I'm just going to get some here onto the back side of the palette knife. And then I'm still going to use my hand to kind of hold down this center part here, and then I just kind of like to get the paste onto the stencil and then just kind of hold it at a little bit of an angle, the palette knife, and then just kind of rub that across the stencil. Just gently, you're not pushing down, you're just very lightly smoothing it across the paper. And if you need a little more, just get a little more. So you see some areas here I've got it a little bit thick. You can't even see the stencil, so I like to kind of go back and get kind of at an angle there and slide across those and kind of remove some of that excess paste so it's not so thick there. And I don't tend to put too much of it back into the jar, but that little area I want to get a little bit more on there, so I can kind of take some of that excess paste and go back over that section a little bit. There we go. And then from there, just want to kind of gently lift off the stencil, kind of hold that paper down, peel that up, and then you want to make sure you go wash the stencil right away or get it into some water, and then you're going to set this to the side and let this dry and crackle. If you try to speed up the drying process of this with like a heat tool or anything, it won't crackle. So you're just going to let that sit and dry, and then depending on how humid and all that it is, it will take longer to dry. So I'm going to let this sit for quite some time because it's pretty hot and humid here right now. To embellish the card, I'm going to use the Vault Gothic Portraits die set and the word Wicked, and I'm going to die cut it from this black glitter cardstock, and then a second time from just some black cardstock, and then I'm going to layer those two together just to make it a little bit more sturdy, and then adhere those layers together using some Distress Collage medium. And then for the other little sentiments that I'm going to use on the card, I just stamped several of them from the Spooky Spirits stamp set onto some of the black craft stock using an embossing ink, and then heat embossed it with some white embossing powder. And then I trimmed those into small little strips using a little technique that you've probably seen me use before with my paper trimmer. I will put a link to another video where I share how to do that. And then I just added a little bit of some foam adhesive to the back to pop those up on the card when I adhere them. Here is a look at the finished dried Crackle, and as you can see, it really just adds a super cool texture. And now we're going to add some color to things using the Distress sprays, and I'm going to be working in a splat box just to kind of help contain the overspray. You could also work in a cardboard box, and then I've just got a paper towel here on the bottom to kind of help soak up some of that excess ink. And I'm going to start off with the Dusty Concord, and I'm just going to spray kind of like a little bit here in the corner and a little bit down here, and kind of like as a diagonal from each other. A little bit in the middle. And when you're working with the sprays, I always have to remind myself, just push down and spray. I tend to like kind of be a little hesitant with it sometimes, and that's when it will do weird things. So it's kind of better if you can just spray and go. Now I'm going to give that a little dry. And if you've got a lot of excess ink on there, you can kind of tilt it around a little bit, and you can add a little water to it like we did there to kind of help that ink flow around a little more if you like. I'm just going to give that a good dry before we add the next color. And then the next color we're going to do is some Seedless Preserves, and I'm just going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to spritz in this area and then in that area a little bit. So a little bit kind of overlapping each other. And we're going to add a little water to that, kind of get those inks flowing a little bit. And then you can see kind of how that ink kind of pools on the side because the paper is starting to warp a little bit. And you just want to kind of tap and dab that off a little bit onto the paper towel if you like, just so it doesn't leave like a real harsh line, or you can kind of use your finger to tab off some of that. It's whatever you like there. And now we're going to do some Villainous Potion. A bit in this section here, a bit there. Get some more water. Now we're going to add a little bit of chipped sapphire. As you can see, I kind of been like going up like across from each other, so it kind of spreads that color, those different colors out across the background here. You know, if you tilt it and it kind of goes where you don't want it, you can always kind of tap at it a little bit. Or just, you know, just go with the flow. So now to add a little more interest to this, I'm just going to take off the nozzle on my distress sprayer and just do some kind of tapping the water and add little water droplets here and there. You can also spray it on if you want, or you know, put some into your hand and kind of flick it on like that if you want. And now I'm going to take a clean paper towel and then just lift off some of that ink, because the water will reactivate it a little bit. And then you can kind of lift it off, and it just adds another little layer of interest to the background. So the last thing I want to do is I'm going to add a little bit of shimmer using some of the Distressed Spritz and Wilted Violet. And you just need to make sure you shake it up and get all of the pearl mixed in. Like right now it's kind of all kind of collected on this one side because I had it laying on the side. So I'm going to make sure I shake that up really well. There's a little mixing ball in there. You just want to shake that up real well until you get everything mixed up real well. So you want to just make sure that when you kind of turn it that you don't see anything, any big areas of just that pearl sitting. So I'm just going to give this a light mist. I'm going to go kind of farther away than up too close. But I'm not going for full coverage. I just want to add a little bit of shimmer over the whole surface. And then I'm going to give that a little dry. And then there is a look at the finished background. So as you can see, I'm going to tilt that a little bit. Just get a little bit of shimmer added from that spritz. And I'm just going to darken up the edges a little bit here with some black soot distress ink. I'm just using a little blending tool and just kind of rub that around the edges here a little bit. And with any of the steps here for creating the background, once you start adding the sprays, like if you don't have all those colors, or you don't have the spritz, or you don't want to do the inking, like you could do all of this with one color of the spray if you wanted. And if you don't have the spritz, you could do like take the mica stains and do the flicking of the end of the nozzle to create little splatters on there. But if you did spray the mica stains on here, it's going to cover up a lot of this paste and everything. Just the nature of those sprays is they're a lot more coverage. But so yeah, so there is our finished background, and we're ready to assemble the card with all of our other pieces. Here's a look at the finished card. Along with the word Wicked, I also die cut some of the bats from black glitter cardstock using the Vault Gothic Portraits die set, and adhered them with some double-sided foam adhesive to give them a little dimension. I hope you enjoyed seeing how this Halloween card came together using some of the new Tim Holtz Halloween stamps, stencils, and dies.